Freedom and Prosperity Radio, your weekly half-hour source for talk about the state and national politics that affect you right here in Virginia.
John asked me to speak about something that's of, I think, grave importance, and it's agencies generally, but EPA particularly, regulating where there was no political will to legislate. I'm going to read you something out of the said Washington Post, and I'm no longer training a puppy, so we actually don't get it anymore. When Congress resists action on pressing environmental issues, regulation provides a way forward, said Thomas Lovejoy, university professor in science and public policy at George Mason. That's in an article, EPA vows to enforce curbs on emissions. What curbs on emissions would EPA be enforcing since Congress refused to enact them? It doesn't matter, because the unelected bureaucrats have decided that they only wait for our elected representatives to act until they're tired of waiting for the elected representatives to act, and then they're going to act. And that's what's going on now with EPA and their what's called the endangerment finding and a series of rules associated with it, against which we and the Attorney General and others are suing. EPA is trying to impose the Kyoto agenda by regulatory fiat using a law passed during the global cooling panic, which every time it was amended and then during the original deliberations addressed the concept of regulating carbon dioxide as a pollutant and rejected the concept of rejecting carbon dioxide as a pollutant. That doesn't matter, however. The Supreme Court in a 5-4 opinion, in April Fool's Day opinion 2007, in Mass versus EPA, in which I and two colleagues represented the skeptic scientists and friend of the court brief, the science was not on trial, it was about the minutiae of the Clean Air Act, ruled that EPA could regulate any compound emitted into the atmosphere as an air pollutant under the Clean Air Act. That includes, for example, O2, pure oxygen, as an air pollutant under the Clean Air Act. In footnote 2, Justice Scalia in his dissent said this interpretation defies common sense. It allows EPA to regulate everything from frisbees to flatulence as an air pollutant. Anything. Don't give them any ideas, by the way, was my response. But anything may be if EPA grounds its decision in the statute. They failed to do that. They've relied on the UN. That's been outsourced. It turns out that's not peer-reviewed. It turns out it doesn't withstand scrutiny and so on. So there's a delegation issue, and many things we're litigating. But EPA is proceeding. After ClimateGate, we petitioned them to reconsider. They said, okay, no. Even after everything we learned, a lot of smoke about the hockey stick, which some of us are also pursuing. So EPA is proceeding, unabated, and it's now up to Congress. But here's what we saw last week. A green activist who's very close to the administration named Jonathan Lash, president of the World Resources Institute, said that he sees a go-getter scenario unfolding under which the U.S. meets most of its emission cuts promised a year ago in Copenhagen. In the talks over Kyoto 2, U.S. emission reductions promised, politically committing the U.S. to something that the Senate has said for years, forget it, both through action and inaction. He says through executive action alone, EPA, DOE, USDA. So we've got a problem. The Department of Interior is locking up land when Congress resists doing so. Obama has said there are other ways to skin that cat now that cap and trade has failed, and that is to go through the legislative process. And by the way, I did address that in detail in this most recent book, Power Grab, subtly subtitled How Obama's Green Policies Will Steal Your Freedom and Bankrupt America. EPA needs to be stopped. EPA is doing this in a rogue fashion. Everybody knows what's going on. So what we have is Congress's responsibility to just say no. And I know in Washington that just is evidence that you're an idiot. You can't just say no. There are 4 horsemen, 4 ways to prove you're smart in Washington. Well, you can't just say no. Take a history class and come back and talk to me. Sometimes that's the only thing you can say. Well, it's inevitable. We have to do something. This is something. 2,000-page bill. Therefore, we must do this. And then business's new line, well, I just need certainty. The oil guys sat down with ethanol the first time, that was the first time, 3 times ago, on ethanol. The auto guys let them regulate the family station wagon out of existence by sitting down the first time, 3 times ago, on CAFE. Certainty doesn't exist. It's a fool's errand. So it's up to Congress. Right now, there's a one-line, one-pager. The Clean Air Act is written, is not intended to be interpreted this way. Carbon dioxide is not a pollutant. We want to return the Clean Air Act to its interpretation of 35 years before a 5-4 majority, and we know how the left feels about 5-4 majorities, before CO2 was selected, not elected, a pollutant. We want to return the Clean Air Act to its 35-year interpretation. just by saying the Clean Air Act as written does not cover carbon dioxide. Then the world's most deliberative body can then proceed deliberately. Here's the problem. We almost got cap and trade last year. My former Congressman Tom Perriello voted for it. As you know, we need to keep my current Congressman Robert Hurt from growing in office and developing, gaining the Washington Post's strange new respect. And the efforts are already underway. Tom Perriello said, I voted for it. And in response to a question on WINA, when they said, what do you say to people who say this will kill jobs? He said, those people aren't living in the real world. In the real world, we're hemorrhaging jobs to India and China because India and China have already done this, which came as a big surprise to India and China. No, they haven't. No, they won't. We need Congress to just pass a one-liner. The problem is in Washington, both parties are agreed on their importance. And so they want to do something. So far, the new chairman of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, the light bulb man, Fred Upton, has said that, oh no, we want to do this. He said a week and a couple of days ago on Fox News Sunday, we want to do this, regulate carbon dioxide as an air pollutant, but responsibly. That's what's gotten Republicans in trouble for decades. Oh no, no, me too, just not as radical as him. You're slow walking your way to the gallows, but still helping construct it. Don't do this. Say no. They don't have an argument. After decades and billions of dollars, they're still resolved by saying, I can't explain it any other way than man. That's not science. That's faith. So make them make their case. Congress needs to step in. It's up to a local congressman here to straighten out leadership. The House Energy and Commerce Committee chairman has to stop saying, we want to do this too, but just reasonably. There's no reason to do it. Ask him, what will the temperature be after you do this? Because there's no dispute anywhere. The temperature after cap and trade, the temperature after Kyoto will be whatever it would have been without it. There's, wait for it, consensus. So ask them, why precisely would you do this? The new line is, well, there's money to be made. Anytime you rob Peter to pay Paul, Paul will hire somebody to do it. Paul will do real well. Paul's enthusiastically supportive. Sometimes the entire enterprise was Paul's idea, as is the case here. I learned this when I was for 3 weeks Director of Federal Government Relations for Enron, when they told me this was my number one priority. With BP, they invented the green jobs industry. Don't fall for it. Happy to explain it. In fact, I did here. Did I mention this book? Green Jobs and Scam is one of the more fun chapters. Green Jobs and Scam. Green Eggs and Scam. You are not going to make money on this. You will offshore jobs, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, and so on. You will get a facility installing giant hamster wheels, and the giant hamster wheels will be made in China if we mandate a certain percent of our electricity come from running on giant hamster wheels. That doesn't mean because somebody got rich off of it that you're actually improving the economy. So Congress needs to pass the one line, say EPA shall not regulate where we were unable to legislate. I'll wrap with this. Mr. Upton's line is, we're not going to let them do that. And he says specifically, regulate where they can't legislate. But he's begging a deal, ensuring they have dug a pit rhetorically, layered it with palm fronds, and he's walking right into it. They proposed these regulations under a 1972 act, written during the global cooling panic, never written for something like this, so ubiquitous, intentional product of combustion. It was never intended to regulate something like this as a pollutant. They're begging a deal by proposing regulations, and they were saying for more than a year, for 2 years, oh, if EPA did this, it would be really bad. You better legislate with me. And now they're saying, oh no, it won't be bad. Which time are you telling the truth? Well, the Republicans are falling for it. The Republicans are saying, yeah, under this false urgency of EPA regulations, which we could get rid of like that with a one-liner, we don't need to delay it for 2 years to beg a 2,000-page bill, a massive overhaul of the Clean Air Act, which is why they're luring Republicans into doing this. Just say no. EPA cannot regulate where we cannot legislate. Mr. Cantor needs to tell Mr. Upton to just say no. When you propose their desired solution as your idea, all you do is move the center very far left and allow them to fill in the details. And there are two critical details if we get to a delay that have to be in there that won't be in there if it's our idea. I'll stop there, and I don't know the format. Do we take questions? Do that later? Let the Attorney General speak?
If you want to take questions, we can do that for a minute.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. I know you're probably familiar with some of the comments about the Joyce Foundation and the Chicago Climate Exchange and the money that they are going to make on this, as well as some of the individuals who are in politics that are going to be making that money. Is there any way that maybe the public can gain more information about this very corrupt effort that's going on that makes them aware that this is a real can.
Mark Levin says it exposes the agenda of the Obama administration and its allies, and details the CCX, may it rest in peace. It has been disbanded because it turns out to make money trading ration coupons, you have to mandate, you have to ration. So the voluntary, we're doing the right thing, and we're making so much money at it, you need a federal mandate to make people buy our stuff now, argument collapsed.
So that is dead. Is that
CCX is disbanded.
Great.
Now, we are working, we have litigation in New Jersey right now. I'm assisting with Americans for Prosperity has got litigation trying to get the documents under what's called RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. We've got various things underway to find out which groups which lobbied this thing into existence are making how much money off of the ratepayers. Very quickly, it's called rent seeking. It's the world's second oldest profession. You make your money not off of innovation or competitiveness. You do it from policy favors from buddies in government. That's what's going on here. Enron created this. They bought the world's largest windmill company on the cheap because it's uneconomic. It's now known as GE Wind. GE is very responsible on this issue right now, of course. What happens is nobody wants windmills unless you have a federal system, generally a federal, but we're doing it through the states now, guaranteeing revenue streams off of the ratepayers' back. Duke Energy's rents are different than Exelon's rents, which are different than GE's rents, but they're all seeking rents, which is a guaranteed revenue stream from the state off of the ratepayers' back. When Exelon says we will make $1 billion additional per year, it's actually a windfall profit, which is not a profit made by an oil company. It's simply an increase in their rates off of your backs for doing nothing, and they admit it in Forbes magazine. So it's out there. Every example we can shed light on. Just we need to keep the politicians from snatching defeat out of the jaws of victory. Don't just do something, sit there, is our advice generally. But right now, you can say no, a one-liner. Do not beg a deal. They're begging a 2,000-page rewrite of the Clean Air Act, and I assure you 1,990 of those pages will be mischief. Just say no and let the world's greatest deliberative body deliberate. Yes, ma'am? I'll stop after this.
Do you think the House will be signing the EPA?
I do not, because the man who'd be responsible for this has already said we want to do this and we want to do it responsibly. They're not looking for fights. One team is generally uncomfortable with these issues. It's someone else's turf. And you've got a very well-funded, noisy effort that's going to start screaming, killing children the minute you do the responsible thing, as at least one man in this room has discovered. And so they don't want to fight. They want to, I want to do this just as, I'm like him but not as radical. That means they don't want to fight. They're waving the white flag. We need to get your representative, and hopefully mine, to stiffen their spine and say this is actually something you just say no on. And just say, I'm not saying, I'm just saying no to the courts rewriting 35 years of interpretation of the Clean Air Act. But they will not. They don't have the stomach for that kind of fight. Look in the eyes of a congressman when you talk about government shutdown. The only reason we got blamed for that is because Newt Gingrich took credit for it. House didn't shut down the government when they passed their budget obligation, and the president refused to sign it. So we need a better messaging operation. And this time, maybe it's a little bit different dynamic because of the Republicans only controlling the House, but you need to encourage them, we're with you. I mean, there's not much more encouraging for an elected official to tell them, we've got your back, and I mean it. We will be out there. Thanks. I'll stick around and talk. So.